This is Jess, and you're listening to the Friendly Atheist podcast. This is a really special episode today. I am joined by Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson from This Day in Esoteric History and Oprahdemics, two of the best podcasts around. I'm not kidding. I talked about Oprahdemics so much to my therapist that they started listening.
That's hilarious.
It was outstanding. Dr. Carter Jackson, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm such a big fan.
Likewise. It's going to be fun.
This is going to be great. Do you want to start by talking about Viola Davis and how she EGOTed, or is that like later?
I know. A lot of my friends are still mad that Beyonce did not win Album of the Year. So like, yeah, there's that turmoil, but EGOT status for Viola Davis is like, first of all, it's about time, I guess we can say. Like, felt like this was meant to be in her future. Like,
it felt inevitable.
Yeah, I can't imagine her not being an EGOT winner. So I don't even know what she won the Grammy for. Do you know what she won?
Her audiobook, which is, I feel like, the go-to sort of
course.
Like everybody's waiting for their
Grammys for that. That's insane.
Oh yeah, that's how everybody EGOTed. That's how like Barack Obama EGOTed. Like it's a sneak around. They're not.
Oh man.
Anyway,
how they get it in there.
That is.
But congrats. I'm very happy for her. I'm very happy that Beyonce has won the most Grammys of all time.
Oh my God, so well deserved.
Yeah, it was a crazy night.
Such excellence. Okay. So your specialty is 19th century Black history. Is that a simplification?
I mean, like at this point, I just say I study the lived experiences of Black people because like I have to teach across my expertise. So my bread and butter is the 19th century, but I do the 20th century. I look at slavery. I look at the Civil War. I look at the long freedom struggle. I look at violence in political spaces. And so it really runs the gamut. But for where I feel I say most at home is in the 19th century, talking about the abolitionist movement in particular.
And so you are the critical race theory people like everyone is yelling about. Is that you personally?
I promise I'm not. Like if you had asked 2-3 years ago, this would not even have been, a thing, obviously. But now it's become, there was I can't even remember what it's called. Some right-wing group that has like a list of professors that are like, like destroying America.
Sure.
And I made the list. Yeah. I was actually really proud. I was like, wow. I would have on there with Cornel West. It was crazy. It was crazy. So, but I also think that, a lot of that is just like they get pull quotes from different interviews I've done or something. And they're like, she's promoting violence. And it's like, because I said the word violence. I mean, so it's wild. I mean, a lot of scholars sort of laugh that stuff off, but it's actually, I shouldn't say that. It's no laughing matter when you think about like what Florida is trying to do, what these, really radicalized groups are trying to do. It's actually very brilliant. I mean, the fact that the study of history, what goes into textbooks, like that's no superficial thing. And they're aware of that. And I think it's too easy to sort of, dismiss them. We really sort of have to grapple with that. Truly.
And it's weird because they're focusing on such seemingly absurd things that it's hard to take them seriously, but you're like, oh no, we absolutely have to. Like, I see that you're mad about the drag queen thing. I don't know how to like meet you there and have an actual conversation about it.
Bad. It's really bad because it just means that like I think the things that we sort of took for granted before about like what gets discussed in a classroom, what gets put in a textbook, none of that is off the table anymore. Everything has become so politicized and so marginalized in terms of the way that we interact with one another that it's just, the work is even harder now for historians. I really feel like that.
Absolutely. So speaking of, one of your specialties is the abolitionist movement. And while 19th century American history is not my forte, I listen to a lot of this podcast called This Day in Esoteric Political History. So I'm learning a lot. So when like growing up, when I was learning about slavery and the abolitionist movement, I always remember being even as a teenager, being very aware that both sides of the argument were fact were checking the Bible as their
yeah.
as their backup for their point of view. Could you speak a little bit to the relationship between Christianity and slave attitudes towards slavery?
Yes. So, I mean, they go hand in hand in a lot of ways. So the way that slaveholders used the Bible, or I should say weaponized the Bible, was a way to say like, oh, this institution is meant to be, because they would use like things like the curse of Ham. I don't know.
Sure.
Bible scholars that didn't know about like this really esoteric moment in the Bible where Noah's sons is one of Noah's sons is cursed, and he is sent to be like the descendant of all Black people, and so all Black people were meant to be
he was
enslaved.
marked with dark skin as a thing of shame, which is like
yes, there are all sorts of like really crazy ways of sort of making a rationale for why Black people should be enslaved. And so, you know, they also pulled scriptures that were like slaves need to obey their masters, and you know, slaves are supposed to be you know, that this is the human order of things, that actually this slavery is a good thing for you, I'm civilizing you, this is what's best for you. And people believed wholeheartedly that what they were doing was like a religious moral duty, if you will, to enslave people, to keep them enslaved, and to be a good master. That was the goal, was to be a good master.
And it was all for their own good.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Very paternalistic.
Very, very paternalistic. And enslaved people who are not completely unfamiliar with the Bible, because if you think about like West Africa, Christianity was in West Africa before the Europeans are really there. And so it's not a foreign religion to them, but they really grasp on to Christianity in major ways. And they look more at the Old Testament for their influences and for their understanding and ideology about their own plight. So they see themselves as like the children of Israel. They see themselves as oppressed, as enslaved. They are looking for the Moses that's going to lead them to the promised land. They are looking for deliverance from God. All of sort of the Negro spirituals are about this deliverance, this and this sort of Israel Pharaoh archetype, to make sense of their own circumstances as well. So you've got two competing, you know, visions of how people are using Christianity in the Bible, how people are seeing Christ. And yet it becomes a real problem. I mean, especially during the Civil War, like when you think about the whole creation of the Southern Baptist Conference, those were white Southerners that believed in slavery. And they were like, well, we're going to fight for the Confederacy. Like we're going to completely split the church based off of, you know, free labor versus slave labor. And a lot of those iterations that you see today manifesting in the Southern Baptist Christian Conference is because of those direct lines to like slaveholding and white supremacy that are still being perpetuated to this day.
It's absolutely insane. And are people still using the guise of Christianity to criticize Black people?
That's a good question. Probably not in the same ways that that they did during slavery. Like there's no one today, hopefully, is like slaves obey your masters. Like, like nobody.
I'm not going to say nobody thinks that.
Well, I know. I hope. I know. We would hope that they would be very French, but
yes,
there is this sort of rationale that Jesus or Christ is a white God, and that white supremacy is sort of the unexamined norm or way of being, and that everybody sort of has to get on to the train that is white supremacy. So they won't say that, but like I attended church all my life. I went to Black churches mostly, but also white evangelical churches. And like that was the tone. It's like, oh, you're welcome to come in, kinda. Don't really change anything. Just be that good Black person that doesn't ask us to change any part of our culture or examine any part of our own racism, and then you'll be fine. And, that does not sit well with a lot of Black people who are like, wait a second. Like, is this Christianity? Is this Christianity? And so, you get huge rifts. You see it in the long freedom struggle with Billy Graham and Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who he's telling Billy Graham, like, you got to call this racism out. Like, this is ridiculous. And Graham refuses to do it. And it causes major rifts that we still experience to this day.
So it's been a historical problem that white Christians are hesitant to call out their fellow Christians in their very obvious racist way. It seems to me that, well, because it's white fragility. Sorry. You know when you answer your own question when you're about to ask it? I was going to say, why is it so much harder for people to call racism?
Yeah.
But it's white fragility.
But it's even more than fragility. I feel like it is having to okay, so James Baldwin has this great quote. I'm hoping I don't botch it, but he basically says to act is to be committed, and to be committed is to put yourself in danger. And then he says, in the minds of most of white Americans, this is the loss of their identity. And what he's saying is basically like, if you want to do this work, you want to be committed, you have to forfeit your power, forfeit your privilege, relinquish your position, and all the things that fortify your identity as a supreme being, right? If you're not willing to do those things, then how do you engage in this work? Like, how do you say, okay, let's go about making the world better, but I can't step down from this platform, but I can't get off this soapbox, or I can't dig into my pocket. If you want me to make change, let's talk about change, but don't require me to go in my pockets. Like that, I think it's actually the mechanics of the change is not really what's hard. Like thinking about redistribution of wealth seems very simple, but putting that into place, I mean, people will lose their lives over trying to preserve white supremacy and these ideologies that are harmful to everyone, not just oppressed people, but all people. And it's something that enslaved people were preaching about for a very long time. Like they saw the Civil War as justice, right? Like you think about the fact that they had been predicting enslaved people, oh, there's going to be a comeuppance. There's going to be a moment in which God is going to, fly down judgment on you. And they see the Civil War as that moment. It's like, do right or lose your life. Right? Yeah. And a lot of people do in the Civil War.
Oh my goodness. Well, has there been another group besides Black Americans who went from enslaved to holding political office like inside a generation?
No.
Is that no. I could not think of any other situation where that would have happened.
No. So we just covered this in my class last week. We were talking about Reconstruction and how during Reconstruction, which is a short, period, maybe 11, 12 years, there are over 1,500 Black elected officials. 1,500.
Is that more than we have now?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't know how many people are in like the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, but it's a lot. So you had people that within one generation, not even a generation, people who were enslaved, some like Robert Smalls, who was enslaved, and then becomes like a local leading official in South Carolina. He's going to Congress. Like you have Black senators from the Blackest states ever, Mississippi, South Carolina. You have radical change. You don't get that in Jamaica. You don't get that in, Barbados or Cuba or Brazil. You could say you get it in Haiti because Haiti becomes an all Black nation. Sure. But Haiti doesn't even get diplomatic recognition until the Civil War from the United States. So, it just shows you, like, Reconstruction gives me hope because it shows me that like you can make massive amounts of change in a short amount of time. Like you don't necessarily need 200 years to make things right. And granted, Reconstruction is not perfect. You know what I mean? There's like, it's not an oasis or whatever, but the amount of change that happens for everyone. There's free school for everyone. Everyone gets public school. Everyone gets educated. There are roads, there are insane asylums, there are hospitals for the elderly and infirm. There are so many, there's banks set up by Black people for Black people. Like the kind of economic wealth, political enfranchisement that comes together all at once is remarkable. And you don't really see it again.
Sure. Would that have been around the time that Tulsa became sort of the economic?
So Tulsa's a little bit later. So
later?
If Reconstruction is like between in the Civil War 1865 to like 1877 is usually where scholars sort of cut it off. You still had, when we say cut it off, it's not a clean cut. So it's not like the next day everybody's back in the Dark Ages. But over time, you know, you slowly get the eroding of Black citizenship, the eroding of Black rights. Slowly but surely, people start to pick up Black codes and Black laws that restrict people from voting. And there are small pockets in which Black people have been able to carve out like these communities of success for themselves. And that's what Tulsa is. They move all the way out west, all the way out to like really Native American country, and they are creating these successful pockets. But the problem is that success puts a target on your back. So if you are, I don't know, just a Black drunkard and you're lazy, no one cares about you. You're not disturbing the status quo. You're not debunking white supremacy. But if you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or you're getting educated, like success made you a target. And so these communities that were functioning pretty independently for the most part, I mean, they circulated all of their dollars within the community, that enraged white communities that they could not grapple with Black success. They didn't want to compete with Black people either. And so they took a lot of these towns out. Arkansas, Elaine, Arkansas, you see these massive race riots. You see them in Louisiana, in Florida, in South Carolina. It's awful.
It was happening in the North too. Like, isn't Seneca Falls part of that?
Seneca Falls has there are race riots all over the country. There's lynchings in Minnesota, like in places where you're like, are there even Black people? There are race riots that take place in Chicago, in Washington, D.C. Part of this is it's a long moment of what Rayford Logan, he's a famous Black historian, he calls the nadir. He basically says from like 1895 till about the 1920s, you have all of this racial resentment. Part of the 1920s, you've got like World War I, Black soldiers are fighting in this war. They're coming back and they're being attacked while they're in uniform. You know, they are a huge threat to the labor market. You have the Klan is at an all-time high. In 1926, they have 6 million members. 6 million members. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Like everybody joined the Klan, everybody, because it was seen as a it's like a fraternity. It's like a social group. There's the barbecue. Yeah. They're throwing a barbecue in the park today. Come join after 2:00. You know, whatever. Like that, people joined for a lot of different reasons. It's only until the Great Depression where people realize actually the Klan's not solving any of my problems. And it becomes like, you know, nobody has money during the Great Depression. So people are less interested in investing themselves in these organizations. But yeah, it's insane. 2 Black people per week are lynched for about a 40-year period, men and women. And not just Black people either. We talk about this on the podcast. Like Jewish people were lynched, Chinese people were lynched, Mexicans were lynched. It was mob rule against pretty much anybody that disrupted the status quo that is white supremacy.
So I bet we can absolutely draw a straight line from the fact that Black Southerners were getting no support from the state or from their like community writ large, and turned to the church and turned very insular, and that has sort of married the Black Americans and the Christian church ever since. Would you say that's a fair? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, the church has always been a pillar in the Black community because it was the place where you went where you got respect. You went to church and people called you sir or ma'am. No one was doing that outside of that. So there's a social sort of affirmation that happens when you're in the presence of other Black people and you're a minister or a reverend. You are held in a position of high regard.
Mm-hmm.
There was no respect for Black people outside of the sacred spaces of like church.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's a space where the church it was a multifaceted institution. So you went there for shelter, you went there for a job, you went there for clothing and extra food, you went there for tips about how to get further north, you went there for childcare, you went there for education. A lot of schools started in churches. So the church was everything. And it was the only institution that Black people controlled themselves, right? We might not be able to control the schools or the banks, but we could control this institution. And it's sort of maintained that pillar all throughout African American history. You'd be hard for us to find a moment in which the Black church is not involved in some way.
Really wrapped up. This is sort of a strange question. I was thinking last night about how we as a collective, as Americans, think about the legacy of slavery. So growing up, for me, the Underground Railroad was like the story, right? It was, this is the cool ass story for like the only interesting historical story. They went underground. They built secret tunnels. Like, you tell me about a secret tunnel and I'm here for it.
Yeah, same.
When I was a kid, I used to read the Babysitters Club, and I think it was Babysitters Club, and one of them had like a secret tunnel that was connected to the Underground Railroad. Like that was a whole thing.
Love it.
And do you have a sense of how people think about it now? Like, given that we've politicized the crap out of everything to the point that people are like, was Harriet Tubman which is the hottest, the hottest, spiciest take is actually Harriet Tubman was a criminal. Like, this is what we're doing. Oh, sorry,
love the dogs. No, it's insane because, first of all, I don't think that we have a healthy understanding of the Underground Railroad.
No.
Like, I have to tell my students, no, there's no train. Not really. Okay, that's not. We're talking about a network, right? We're not
an emotional railroad.
Yes, and it's houses. You know what I mean? It's people's attics or basements. It's not. You hop on the number 9 to get to Philadelphia or whatever. Like that doesn't exist. But I think we have all of this romanticism or nostalgia around something as secretive and as worthy as the Underground Railroad. And I kind of want to demystify that a little bit because it was incredibly dangerous. Most people are not able to run away. The majority of enslaved people stay enslaved. And when you ran away, you had to be armed and you had to be willing to die because people were constantly chased. And so oftentimes it's not just like, flight or fight. It's you have to fight in order to flee. Like, and so Harriet Tubman's always packing a gun. And there's a reason, because she was always being chased. People were always on the lookout for her. I mean, these were really high stakes because enslaved people cost so much that it was a lucrative business to be a slave catcher. If you could kidnap a Black person and sell them into slavery for $1,500 or $1,000, I mean, this is like, I don't know, think of the black market or some sort of underground market, drug trade or whatever. It's highly lucrative and violent and deadly. Like, the drug game is the only thing that I can sort of like equate to it, with the level of violence, the level of wealth that gets produced by enslaved labor. So it's not this kind of like, I don't know, sweet story of running away in the middle of the night with a lantern and it's like dogs catching you, chasing you. It's terrifying.
Oh my God, can you
when
imagine?
I think of like, I don't know. I fell in love with like American Girl doll collection. I love Addie.
Addie.
Yeah,
right?
Addie. I loved Addie. I loved she's another Mildred D. Taylor. She wrote like Let the Circle Be Unbroken, and these stories that probably are the reason why, absolutely are the reason why I'm a historian today. But I couldn't get enough of them. But I think now we have to be a lot more honest about what is entailed. I tell people there's a really good story called If You Traveled Along the Underground Railroad, and it's a story maybe meant for like 4th or 5th graders or like middle school, depending on how advanced your child is. But it's a great way to introduce them to like, what is the Underground Railroad? Who was running it? What were they doing? What were they up against? It uses very plain language to make it clear and understanding, but also has really good pictures and images for you to understand. So yeah, I tell people all the time, like, this was it's like the deadliest catch was the Underground Railroad. Because the stakes were so high, you know?
Mm-hmm. So your book is about the history of violence. And why is it that we mark time by violence?
That is a good question.
Did y'all bring that up on this day? I think it was
we
y'all
talked about it. Yeah.
Somebody said that and I was like my whole brain just exploded.
The historical timeline is every dot on it is violence. It's like, the American Revolution, the Civil War, or World War I, or World War II, 9/11, like Vietnam. Major violent acts, I think of like the death of Emmett Till or the death of 4 little girls in a Birmingham church. Like assassinations, we mark time with violence. Rarely, very rarely on a historical timeline do we mark it with something like a party. A birthday.
The Great Depression, I guess, would be a non-violent.
I'm trying to think of something that is not violent that we mark the 4th of July. Even that's violent.
That's not violent. So just listen to the episode about Laddie Boy. We could call that something.
I mean, we understand change over time through violence. I think violence is an engine. I think it propels us along from movements and moments and major change. And one of the ways that we understand, I think, revolutions, a revolution is just like a new system, a replacement of something. But revolutions are often violent. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, like, we understand revolutions as not just change, but change marked by violence. And I don't know how to bring about meaningful, lasting, revolutionary change that does not involve violence. Because even if you look at the long freedom struggle or the civil rights movement, and you could say, well, that was nonviolent. And it's like, actually, not really. People were being killed all the time. They're actually responding to violence. The whole freedom struggle is a response to white supremacist violence. At the auction, at the voting booth, at the lunch counter, in schools. Yeah. So I don't know how we talk about anything without talking about violence. The short answer.
No, absolutely. That completely makes sense. Okay. Do you want to talk about? Wait, do you have any other? Wait, let's dig back into the 19th century before we get to Oprah. Yeah. I just love talking about it. Actually, yeah. Before we get to Oprah, quickly, I would love to talk a little bit about the Black Panthers and J. Edgar Hoover. So J. Edgar Hoover has recently become like a historical obsession with me because that man was a lunatic.
Yeah. And he had a long career, as most lunatics do. They seem to live forever.
They just thrive on chaos.
He's in the 60s. You're like, when does this man die?
Yeah.
J. Edgar Hoover. Wow. So funny because my son, shout out to my son, William, he just won student council. Ooh. And he had to give a speech. And in the speech, we talk about like Black history stuff all the time. And so I guess we had just done the Black Panther breakfast program. And so he gave a speech and he said, I want you to elect me for student council because the Black Panthers provided free breakfast for all kids. And I want everyone to get free snacks and free lunch. I was like, oh my God. I was dying.
I'm so happy right now.
I was dying, but he won. So apparently said, oh, and we need a garden and everyone can get free food from the garden. I was like, you've got great ideas, son.
Great ideas. Is he gonna get there at 4 a.m. and whip up some eggs for everybody?
I know, right? So he, you know, we do our best to try to incorporate them in the conversations we have about like history or whatever. But when it comes to the Black Panther Party, it's just the story of the Black Panthers, I think, is a really sad one in the sense that the ideas that they had were so progressive and so revolutionary and so basic, right? Food, school, health, like those were the things that they were pushing. Protection. Hey, I don't want to be killed by the police. You know, we're not asking for like extraordinary things. And they, within a matter of a few years, one, become really, really successful at feeding all of the anyone who wants free breakfast, lunch, dinner, what have you, at providing health care for Black people when health clinics weren't doing it, providing ambulances when no one would come to the hood, providing protection when people felt like their lives were at risk. And Hoover systematically undermined them at every turn. He had hired the first Black FBI agent to work as a spy for the Black Panther Party, you know, and to stir up trouble. Matter of fact, Black Panthers always said they could tell who was a cop because it was the first person who would say, let's blow this place up. Let's bomb it. And like, you're an informant, get that man out of here. Like they always knew because they were never pushing for like violence and throwing Molotov cocktails. So always informants. Drugs, I think, became a huge issue as well. You know, Huey P. Newton gets addicted to drugs. A lot of the Panthers spent most of their time fighting lawsuits and being in the courts. And, you know, the judicial system really gets the better part of the movement. And so when I say it's unfortunate, I'm saying in that sense, I think all the things that they pushed for were the same things that the Black Lives Matter pushes for today, or something that the abolitionist movement or civil rights people were pushing for. They wanted more than just the vote. They wanted food. They wanted jobs. They wanted full citizenship. They wanted protection. They wanted good schools for their kids. And Hoover was adamant about destroying them, adamant. And so there was nothing that they could do. There's something that me and a good friend of mine, she's a Panther scholar, we talk about this all the time. Because she says, you know, the Black Panthers, when they came out, they were all about self-defense and they all had guns and, you know, like they pushed the Second Amendment right and all this stuff. And she said very quickly they understood, actually, this is getting us killed. Guns are not effective. Guns are not going to get us free. We just need to worry about feeding our people and, you know, getting them healthy and getting them educated. And I was like, isn't that something that the United States government is more terrified of a healthy, fed, literate Black person than they are a Black person with a gun? That is mind-boggling.
It's absolutely wild that it felt so urgent to them. Like this felt so dangerous to them. It's so insidious. I would love to circle back around something you said. The interesting thing about, I'm as an adult getting very, very into American history. I was a lit major, so I sort of had things around that, but now I'm really enjoying learning more to kind of connect dots in a way. And so one theme I keep seeing over and over again is when cops are infiltrating groups to find these dangerous people, they're usually the ones inciting violence.
Yes.
And nothing makes me like deeply angry more than that kind of shit of the cop comes in to find these insidious, terrible people, and he is the one who
starts all the trouble, starts all the drama. It's
What are we doing, gang? Like what? How
I know.
is this?
It's so crazy that even in the 19th century, I talk about this in my book, some of the most effective slave catchers were Black because they could win the trust of other fugitive slaves and say, oh, hey, you're trying to get to freedom? Come with me. I'll show you. And then they take them to the next place and then sell them down the river to somebody else. Like you will always have mercenaries, right? You will always have hired hands. You will always have people that won't do right. And I think the federal government and the local government are always attuned to like who they can hire to be that mercenary, who they can compel to do that work. And I think when you have people that are starved for jobs and food and shelter, you don't have to bribe that much to say, hey, I got a good job for you. You want to make $100? You want to make $1,000? I need you to go snitch on these people. I need you to go make this peaceful rally look horrible. Threaten to throw a bomb or something like that. You know, like they knew the ways that they could undermine Black success, and they did. And that's the tragedy of it. Like it's like Reconstruction. The tragedy is not that it happened. That the thing is, it was successful and it worked. The tragedy is that it was never allowed to fully blossom, to fully bloom into the revolutionary work that creates sustainable change, permanent change.
Yes. Well, and conservatives really are kind of geniuses in how they are dismantling the American understanding of the Black experience, because I didn't learn about, so generational wealth is a thing that I don't think people can grasp, especially without obviously learning it as a kid. So I was in my 30s before I learned that the GI Bills from World War II were not extended to Black soldiers, and there were there's a
redlining and all of the, I mean, when you think about the question, Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about this too. Like reparations is not just about slavery. Like it's not just about money lost with slavery. We can put that on one table, but on the other table, you think about the wealth lost from the GI Bill. Being able to attend a college for free, to buy a home with no payment down. Like, I mean, we bought our first home. My husband was a veteran, so we bought our first home with the VA loan. So it's like, you think about the kind of wealth that people build with their homes. All of that wealth is lost. It's gone. You think about the 2008 crisis and how Black and brown communities were getting these subprime mortgage loans. And then within a few years, white America's recovered, but Black and brown people have not. Like it's astounding how theft takes place. It's not just about unpaid wages. It's also about like the theft of the ability to build, you know, generational wealth for the following generations. It's staggering. I can't think about it too long because like it makes me mad. You know what I mean? I think about like what my grandparents could have had or my great grandparents could have had. And they say it also takes 5 generations to build wealth. So if I count like from my generation, maybe I'm generation 5. So maybe I'll be the first to give my kids something substantial. But even that, you worry like, what if some kid messes up and the next thing you know, it's gone for the next, you know, like it's so precarious. Wealth is so precarious. But we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it in the classroom. We don't talk about like how when grandma dies, you get $250,000 and I get $50,000 in debt. You know, like there's not an even playing field at work. We don't have enough conversations about that.
No, I was speaking to a friend of mine who has 2 teenage daughters who are about to go to school, college, and she was complaining about the scholarships. Oh, I can't find any scholarships because they're white and we're Christian and blah, blah, blah. And we're working hard and we're scraping by and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of had the opportunity to sit with her and say, like, okay, well, say one of your girls fails out of college, she can come back home, right? Like you'll have a bed for her and be able to feed her if that doesn't work out. Not everybody has. Do you remember when Mitt Romney said something about like, hey, if you have to take a loan from your parents?
Yeah. I was like,
and
what?
People were like, Dang.
What loan for my parents? That's not happening.
Saying?
I mean, I kid you not. One of my friends called me, and she just bought a house in Colorado. She's really happy, her and her husband had it built from the ground up and all of that. And she said she met her next door neighbors, and they were high school dropouts. I think one graduated high school. Neither one of them had gone to college.
Sure.
But and she was like, how are you? Like, we both have master's degrees. Yeah. Like, how are we neighbors? And she said, oh, yeah, we wanted to buy a house. So our parents gave us $250,000 to buy the house.
Oh.
I was like, what? Like, the idea of just, you get married and here's your house. Like, that does not happen in most marginalized communities where wealth is not being, generated in that way.
100%.
So yeah, there's no way. I mean, I think when I moved into my house, my mom bought me some pots, and I was really happy. I was like, oh, great, I can cook. But put down a down payment? Are you kidding me? No, there's no down payment.
No. Yeah, they're not sitting on that somewhere waiting for you to call up and be like, hey, I'm ready to tap into. Have you seen Dairy Girls?
No.
Okay, it's outstanding, but there's a thing where they're trying to get money to go to Paris for a school trip, and the one girl is like, "Oh, I'm just dipping into my what is it that my inheritance? I'm just dipping into my inheritance." And so these girls who all live in like a poor, basically the projects in Ireland are like, could I just go ahead and dip into my inheritance to grab that? And she's like, oh, yeah. And just like the next day they're walking to school like, I guess we're poor. I don't.
No, that's real. It's real.
Outstanding.
There's nothing that there's nothing you can. It's not that you can't even pull from your parents or your grandparents. It's that even when you do get something, even when you're like, I finally made it, that money goes elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? That money's helping grandma and your parents and your aunties and your cousins and everybody else who needs to get up the ladder.
That's the story of every professional athlete who makes it big.
Yes. So it can't be, on the one hand, you don't want to be selfish. On the other hand, it's not sustainable to give to everyone. But like, that's how overwhelming it is when you want to be able to pay it forward, and yet, how are you ever going to accumulate wealth if you can't keep wealth?
Well, and nobody's taught them how to manage money. So all of a sudden you're like, oh, great, I have 10 million.
Stocks? Like, I learned maybe in the past several years, my husband's really into it now, but like, I had no idea how. I just thought you have a checking account and a savings account. When you get a little extra money, you put it in the savings account. And then you save and save and save until you get, I don't know, $1 million.
Like you have money, you wait a year, and then you get a lot more money. How do I do that?
Yeah. How do you make money? Like, but it's also, I mean, we talk about this with my colleagues also, it's incredibly intimidating if you don't have that infrastructure, that know-how, to then go out and say, okay, I'm going to take $1,000, which took me 6 months to save, let's just say, and put this in some Morpheus account that I don't know what it's going to do. Even if it will make you another $1,000, right? You're still not trusting, because you're like, do you know how long it took me to get this money? I'm not throwing this in some stock market for it to like, go away. So yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with my brother-in-law, just trying to get him to like, I was like, just start small, just invest in, what is it? It's like Stash. It's like where you can like pick the stocks you want to invest in or whatever. So it was like, just start out small, but telling him to take a big chunk of money and do that, it's overwhelming.
Yeah,
it really is. You need somebody that can walk you through it. And most people don't have that.
Unless they were watching Oprah and got some financial tips there. That's a segue, my friends.
Like, oh God. If we could talk about how Oprah, I mean, listen, I love Oprah, I do, but sometimes I'm like, man, billionaires be so out of touch.
So I think that is why Oprahdemics is such an outstanding podcast is it's not, we're just going to take an hour a week and fawn over Oprah and gloss over her flaws and only bring out the good things in Dr. Oz, who like,
yeah.
But you and your co-host sit with these things in a way that
we did a whole episode on Dr. Oz.
A whole episode on Dr. Oz and the sort of I would love to talk about the episode of Oprah on the LA riots.
Oh yeah.
Some of the wildest audience participation questions I have ever heard.
That episode was so much fun to do because we got to do it with our friend Elizabeth Hinton, who studies like riots and violence. And I realized that, like, aside from maybe Twitter today, we don't have like the water cooler spot where people come and you have an audience made up of tons of different kinds of people and everyone's sort of giving their takes or getting the mic and giving their 2 cents. And the idea of like having a talk show, and this was before, you know, when Oprah first starts out, she's not it's not just her on the stage not engaging, she's all in the audience. She's, you over here, okay, you over here, okay, tell me this, like, and it was like a time capsule of just seeing how much has changed, how much has stayed the same. A lot of it has stayed the same. And trying to figure out like, wow, what do we do with that today when we're so siloed into our own sort of like thought groups that we don't have a space where talk shows come together and let people sort of air their dirty laundry or their baggage or whatever. And even now I think about the talk show scene, it's all done by celebrities. Like there's not like the original talk shows, they were nobodies. Do you know what I mean? Sally Jessy Raphael, like Jenny Jones, they just came out of like nowhere. They had no name recognition, no followers. Like nobody knew Oprah, and everybody watched them. Now you can't get into the game unless you already have you know, a Grammy or like a million followers or whatever. And then the conversations are so highly curated. You can't really have a discourse in the way that they were. But we need that now, because when we think about the Rodney King beating, that was the Tyree Nichols of our day, you know, of my day. That was my current event in the 3rd grade. Like we needed ways to talk about that. And Oprah created a space, not just Oprah alone, because other people were, I mean, it was like the heyday of time talk shows, daytime talk. But people were doing that in ways that we can't even get our mind around now. But like those conversations are gold. Ratings gold, everything gold.
So okay, the exchange between the 2 white ladies who were like,
gosh, yes.
Can you kind of walk us through that? It's go watch this episode.
If you can go on YouTube, they're on YouTube now, and you can watch, I'm pretty sure, the whole episode. And she was in LA. She took her show to LA for the whole week. So she was there, like, you know, talking to everybody. Luke Gossett Jr., the actors there, a whole bunch of people are there. There's a discourse that happens between a younger white woman and an older white woman. So the younger white woman is sort of like, you know, we didn't see the whole tape. We didn't know all that happened, you know, like trying to give the benefit of the doubt to the cops and all of this. And the audience is just like apoplectic. Like they cannot take what this young girl is saying. And each time she speaks, she sort of digs her hole a little bit deeper. Like she's so like, horrible to watch. I'm educated. I just graduated college. Like we're like, oh my God. She
might as well have yelled, I'm a good white.
It was bad. So this older white woman really sort of like pulls her to side, like, oh no. You don't understand. Like I lived through the civil rights movement's 20 years ago. Like so for her, it's very recent. And she's like, I know how people interact in the South. I know like all the social norms. I know how white supremacy works. I'm fluent in it. And you are missing something very key to this discussion. And she says to her, you know, you don't beat a dog like that. You don't beat anything like that. Like there's no rationale that you can come up with that can make that beating make sense. And everyone in the audience is just like, clapping and all that stuff. But it was a moment in which I think, one, Oprah, you almost forget that Oprah's there a little bit. Like, she's holding the mic, but she's not, she's not really holding court.
She's letting it happen.
Yeah. She's letting it, and she's probably thinking, this is ratings gold. But it was just such a TV moment to see these two white women of two different generations grappling with their understanding of racism, and how the older white woman could call a spade, and how the younger white woman really couldn't. And this, I think, is so important because we think that the younger generation is more progressive. We think, we just have to wait for all the grandma and grandpas to die and then we'll get the world we want to live in. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. Like, that there are young people who don't know, but are also steeped in bad history and bad politics, and they perpetuate those ideas. They perpetuate them in their thinking, in their voting, in their shopping, purchasing, whatever. That the way we understand racism is not at all dependent upon age. And so, or experience or educational level, because she makes a claim about being college educated or whatever. And it's like, girl, you missed a serious education. But it's wild. I mean, that episode, I have a lot of favorite episodes. It's really hard to pick a favorite one. But that was one of the first episodes we did for the podcast. And it just, it resonated with people. I think it took people back. You know what I mean? It took people back to that moment. For those who had never seen it before, they could also sort of imagine like what TV was like in the 80s and 90s. And wild.
I mean, the experience, there's so many like specific experiences that are no longer a thing, like, going to Blockbuster on Friday night, but like, that feeling of like, oh my God, it's 2:58. I have to get home in 2 minutes and get on my couch for this thing to start. I will go to the bathroom during the commercial break. Like, this is priority number one. It's such a like weird, like piece of history that's just sort of,
no, we don't watch TV at a certain time anymore. I mean, I watch things when I can get to them, like, I may watch the news or even the Grammys. Like, if I missed it, I can just watch the clips on Twitter or whatever, or social media. Nothing gets watched in real time anymore.
Yeah. I think HBO kind of has the lock on like All of Us is pretty good right now. And like, it's the first time we're doing that since like Game of Thrones ended, which was.
Yeah. But even still, like, I love binging. So even when something comes out, I give it 2 to 3 weeks. Like, don't anybody say anything. Like, so that, because what I found is that oftentimes when I watch the first episode, the next thing I want to do is watch the second one. And so I try to give myself like a build up in order to do that. But yeah, I mean, that's why I watch a lot of stuff like during the breaks, like summer and, winter break or whatever is when I consume a lot of stuff. But unless it's like a breaking news or, like something happening at this moment. Oh, do you see what's going, like January 6th? I remember all my friends were calling me, are you watching the news? Are you watching the cat? And I was like, what is going on? What is going on? Like, that I watch live, right? Like, but very few instances are like that, thankfully. But like,
totally.
But nothing requires a whole lot of immediate attention, which is why we're inundated with things that are trying to get our attention.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay, I want to be mindful of your time. We're coming up.
Oh yeah, I know. We gotta wrap up.
Yeah.
I have another meeting in a half hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally forgot. This was great though. It shows you how fast it can go by.
It just flew by. I just was like, that can't be right. Did my clock stop working? Okay, Dr. Carter Jackson, where can we find you on the internet?
I am all over. I am on Twitter still. It is what it is.
That's what we literally every episode we're like, we're still on Twitter, I guess. Until further notice.
Hey, Kellie Carter Jackson is my hashtag. I'm on Instagram, but not really. I only get on Instagram to just look at pictures, and I don't even heart. I just scroll. I never post anything. I think the last post I had was like when my daughter was born 3 years ago. Like, like I I never post. I'm on Facebook, but that's like more like for family and friends so they can see the kids and stuff. But yeah, I try to post if I have a talk coming out or something, but mostly you can catch me on This Day in Esoteric Political History 3 times a week, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we are starting up with season 2 of Oprahdemics. We will likely have a new name because we got sued.
So what? By whom?
Oprah. We did.
Wait.
Harpo Inc.
What?
Let me tell you something. There's nothing more terrifying than seeing your name in the Hollywood Reporter. And it says like Harpo Inc. versus Jackson. And you're like, what?
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah, it's
Wait,
crazy.
is it just because you literally used her name?
Yeah, and she wasn't a fan of us using the name. So and I think that we were in the works to change it anyways, but now we're definitely. So we still don't know what the new name will be. Probably in the next month or so we'll have a new name, and you can still go to the old, like you can still go to Oprahdemics, and then eventually it will forward you to like a new what our new name is going to be. So if you've got ideas,
I'm going to brainstorm on this all day. That's outstanding. Dr. Carter Jackson, I think you are as good a historical communicator as there is. I feel like I have listening to you sit and digest things in context of today and in context of the contemporary time. It's been a masterclass. I cannot recommend This Day Pod anymore. And they're 15-20 minute episodes for this
quick
niche thing in history. And sometimes it's something huge. This past week it was about whose dog? Warren G. Harding's dog Laddie. There's been like 4 presidential pet episodes.
We like pets. We like pets.
Family. And Oprahdemics, truly, like, I just really adore how you are really unflinching about being honest about Oprah's legacy while still being a fan, but not letting her off the hook for some really messed up shit she's pulled.
Stay tuned to season 2. It's no joke.
I'm really excited about it. Okay, thank you so much for your time and your work. And I hope we get to speak again soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Have a great day, okay?
Bye.
Bye.